Bonjour, today let's compare two tenses in French, the imparfait versus the conditionnel. Okay, right. Now, this lesson has for objective to understand the difference between the imparfait or imperfect and conditionnel or conditional tense and when to use them. Now, before we start, and when you have a minute, please refer back to my lessons on how to conjugate a verb in the imperfect and conditional in French, as this lesson has only got for objective to show you the difference between the two tenses and not how to conjugate them. I will, however, give you some examples to give you an idea to put them together, basically, and show you the difference. What I'm going to do is explain to you when we use the imperfect and when we use the conditional, okay, just to start with. So let's have a look first at the imperfect tense. Now, the imperfect, also referred as imparfait in French, but in English also referred as past progressive or continuous tense. It is a tense which is used to describe an action which used to happen or was happening. So basically, it is used to refer to an action which starting in the past and carried on over a period of time. It can be used to describe a habit. For example, je jouais au tennis tous les mercredis. So I used to play tennis every Wednesday. See the habit, every Wednesday. In the past, I used to play tennis. Or it can be used to present an action that was going on when an event suddenly happened. For example, je regardais la télévision lorsque quelqu'un a frappé à la porte. Which means I was watching TV when someone knocked on the door. Please also note that the imperfect can also be used in the descriptions of landscape, weather, etc. For example, il faisait beau et les oiseaux chantaient. So it was sunny and the birds were singing. And it can be used to describe memories, feelings. For example, quand j'étais enfant, when I was a child or when I was a child, je rêvais de devenir chanteur. I used to dream of becoming a singer. So we've got an idea of what the imperfect is in French, but what about the conditional? And most of all, why am I comparing the two? Now, the conditional is a tense which describes an action that may happen if another action takes place. So in English, you use would in front of a verb. So it is used as a way to form a condition, the conditional. So for example, you would say, I would buy a house in France if I had the money. The condition is that if I have the money, then I can buy a house in France. In French, there isn't such a thing as the modal verbs would, could, or should. So it is necessary to use the correct endings for the conditional. So that is the objective of this lesson. Why have I chosen these two tenses as a comparison? Well, it is because the endings of the imperfect and conditional are exactly the same. Have a look at them. Here we go. For je, it's est. For tu, it's est. For il, elle, on, it's est. For nous, it's ions. For vous, it's iez. For il, elle, it's est. So, when do you know when we are talking in the imperfect or conditional? Okay, and how, you're going to ask me, but okay, if the endings are exactly the same, how do you do it? How do you make the difference between a used to be action and a would do action? Okay, now the sound varies, and I'm going to show you a few examples to prove that the sound is different. Okay, not the sound as such, sorry, but the spelling of them is different. So, but have a look at it really closely because that's when it becomes tricky. Now, in the conditional, you will hear re sound, which you will not hear in the imperfect, okay? And that's pretty much the difference because the stem used in the conditional is the same one as we use in the future tense. And I think the best way for me to explain that is by showing you the example. And then you can compare the imperfect next to the conditional and you would understand that actually the ending is the same, but yet the stem is different. Okay, have a look at the verbs such as marcher. I'm going to take a first group verb here as an example. Marcher. Now in the imperfect tense, and we use the tense that the endings that I've just given you, for je it's AIS, we agree with that. Okay, so have a look. Je marchais. That's the imperfect tense, and that means I used to walk. Now, what I've said to you is that for the conditional, we use the stem of the future tense. In order to be able to do that for marcher, have a look at the future tense first. Je marcherai. And that's a future tense, which means I will walk. Yet, it is not the conditional tense. In order to do that, you take the stem, ding, of the future tense, okay, marcher with a re, and you add the imperfect ending, AIS. Have a look at that. Je marcherai. And suddenly we have I would walk. Okay, so this is where you have to be extremely careful. It is very different in that the stem, the beginning of that verb has changed. And how did we do that? We use the future tense of that same verb. So je marchais, I used to walk. Je marcherai, I would walk. Okay? So let's have a look at another verb, which is a third group. Okay, I'm trying to use different verbs to give you an idea here. Vendre, to sell. Now, vendre is a highly irregular verb. Let's have a look. If we want to use the imperfect tense of vendre, nous vendions, and that means we were selling, but you want to say we would sell, knowing that the ending IONS is the same. Like I said, imperfect, conditional, same endings. But what changes is the stem. Now, you need to know the future stem of vendre in order to conjugate in the conditional tense. So, the future of vendre is nous vendrons, we will sell. Okay, now have a look at the stem. Vendre. That's the thing we are going to use. That's the thing. The stem we are going to use for the conditional. Here we go. Nous vendrions. Okay? So, what we've done, we've added the IONS, which is the ending that we want for conditional, but we have attached it to the stem of the future. Now, let's have a look at another verb from the second group, let's say. Finir. Finir, to finish. Ils finissaient, so they were finishing, okay, ils finissaient, okay. But how would you say they would finish? Because we don't want to say they were finishing, we want to use the same endings, A-I-E-N-T. Now let's have a look at the future of finish. Ils finiront, they will finish, so we are going to use that stem and attach it to the conditional endings. Ils finiraient, they would finish. Okay, do you get that now? Let's have a look at a few others. Let's have a look at être, which is to be, which is really hard to conjugate. So I would advise you to know how to conjugate être by heart. Now here we go. Vous étiez, you were. Okay, you were being as well, that means. Remember, it's the imperfect. But how do we do that in the conditional? First of all, what is the stem in the future tense? Vous serez. You will be completely different from the imperfect. However, we're using the same ending as the imperfect for the conditional, IEZ, with that stem from the future, ser. So let's have a look. Vous seriez. You would be. Okay, do you get that? I know it's really hard to grasp, and that's why I've chosen really hard ones here, verbs. Je faisais, I was doing. The stem for the future is faire. Je ferai, I will do. And how do we say I would do? Je ferai. Okay? Now, though the ending of future and conditional sound the same, they mean different. They actually are not spelled the same way. Okay? But they do sound the same for je. Now, have a look at nous. We had. Nous avions, imperfect. Nous aurons, future tense. We will have. But how do we do conditional? Take the ending for nous, imperfect, and add it to the stem of the future tense. Nous aurions, we would have. Now, I've got here a very hard one to show you how really difficult it is. And again, you have lots and lots of different other verbs that you can play with. Now, I've chosen envoyer because that's a tough one. Envoyer means to send. Now, if you wanted to say we used to send, and again, for nous, the ending of imperfect IONS, as well as the conditional. So, nous envoyions, okay, we used to send, or we were sending. Now we will send is nous enverrons. Have a look at the difference, and this is the stem we want for the conditional. Nous enverrions, and that is we would send. Okay? So, to recap, to know whether a verb is in the imperfect or conditional tense, you need to check the stem. If there is an r, then the verb is in the conditional. I would advise you to learn the stem of the main irregular verbs, and please refer back to how to conjugate the third grade verbs in the conditional video. Okay, there is such a thing. And when you use a conditional tense with a clause introducing by C, remember to use the imperfect afterwards.
I've got a question.
Oh, what's the question?
How do you find the stem of the imperfect tense?
Okay, Adam, that's a very good question, actually. Now, the way you do that, and it is true, actually, how do you know? I'm telling you, well, this is the imperfect, but how do I know how to conjugate the imperfect? What you do, listen very carefully. You take the nous form of the present tense and use the stem for the imperfect tense and add those endings that I have given you. So, an example for boire, to drink, you conjugate it in the present tense. Je bois, tu bois, il boit. Nous buvons, vous buvez, ils boivent. You take the nous form of that present tense. So in that case, it's nous buvons. You take the stem, ding, I'm taking it out, buve, B-U-V. And if you wanted to put it in the imperfect tense, you add those imperfect endings. So we have them here. Je buvais, tu buvais, il buvait, nous buvions, vous buviez, il buvait. Okay? But please, people, try to take out as many third group verbs as possible which are relevant to you, okay, every day, the top 20, and know how to conjugate them, know their stem for the imperfect and know their stem for the future and the conditional. Okay. Now remember to subscribe to Learn French with Alexa, the YouTube channel. Leave a comment and I shall see you super soon. Au revoir, à bientôt et puis bisous bisous.